Hello and welcome to another episode of Shattered Lives, Reach Ireland's crime podcast for the Irish Silly Star and Irish Mirror. I'm crime and defence editor Michael O'Toole. I'm joined as ever by our crime correspondent Paul Healy. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Michael.
Right, it's been another very busy week. Let's get straight into it. You were working on a really horrific story in Limerick about a lady who was mauled to death by, I think they're XL bully dogs, are they?
Yes, XL bully dogs. This is a very tragic story, and it's one that I suppose has kind of shocked the nation. In a sense, it's the kind of story I suppose we've read about in the UK, but these types of attacks, well, fatal attacks anyway, are not that common here in Ireland. But tragically, in Limerick on Tuesday night, Nicole Morey, she's a 23-year-old woman, and she was living in an address there in Ballyneety in County Limerick when she was set upon and attacked by two XL bully dogs, which belonged to her and her partner. There were four XL bully dogs in total on the property, and basically my understanding of the incident is that Nicole opened the front door of her property and was set upon by two of these dogs at the front of the property. They're very, very powerful, strong dogs, and she was completely overcome by them and killed in a horrific attack.
Now, I was busy yesterday, so I wasn't involved in this story at all. So I'm just reading it like a punter, I suppose. Did you had a story? Was it caught on video?
Yes, I mean, this is, I suppose, another horrific element to it. There was a CCTV system on the actual house, and my understanding of it is that loved ones, relatives of Miss Morey, actually viewed and saw the CCTV footage of what happened to her. Were obviously helpless to do anything for her. She was the only one at the property at the time. I understand her partner was away. So members of her family, I understand, saw that horrific footage, which does show the dogs attacking her and, ultimately taking her life. I can't imagine what that's like for any family member or friend to view. But I think probably what's more shocking is that footage, which I haven't seen, and thank God I haven't seen it, but there is footage of the attack which has spread on social media. How exactly it ended up on social media, I have no idea. But to such an extent that Gardaí had to put out a warning to the public and the media not to share, not to highlight this footage and its location and where it is, because it's horrendous stuff.
This is an increasing factor. I think we see more and more appeals in Garda press releases for people not to share footage. Yeah. Now, there's one case, I won't talk about it, but it's sub judice, but we know that there was a video of an incident which is very, very serious, and guards had to issue that. You probably know the one I'm talking about. We just can't really talk about it. But even, do you remember there were a couple of really bad car crashes, one in the M50? I think it involved a lady and it was very, very serious. And there was footage of that. So it is an increasing factor, I suppose, that really sad and desperate events do go on social media. And you just really feel for the families involved in that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what it is about. I suppose it's just the times that we're in. Everything is on video now. But what propels people to share it? I don't know. Is it grim curiosity? It's very disturbing. I mean, look, a life has been lost here in a very gruesome and horrific manner. And this woman was helpless, unfortunately. Just in terms of the tragic facts that have come out in this case, my understanding is, as I said, these dogs belonged to Nicole and her partner. And you can see from her social media, from her TikTok page in particular, that she loved these dogs, that she reared them. And family members have even said that she raised these dogs like they were her own children. So that's another tragic element to it. I mean, these were family pets, sadly turned on her for whatever reason. and it started, I suppose, a kind of a national conversation about the safety of these types of dogs and whether or not people should be allowed to have them at all.
As I say, I was away all day yesterday doing a feature with the Air Corps, but I just watched the tail end of the news last night. Are they banned in Britain in the north?
They are banned. XL bully dogs are banned in the UK unless you have a particular permit for them. But if effectively, it is now a completely barred breed, and that is because of the sheer number of attacks that have happened in the UK and fatalities. I think a massive increase in fatal dog attacks between 2022 and 2023, and the vast majority of them are said to be XL carried out by XL bully dogs. They're a particularly dangerous breed, and lots of groups have been lobbying for them to be barred in other countries, including our own. So I understand the ban is now coming in Northern Ireland. Hasn't come in yet, but is to come in. And there is so Minister for Agriculture Heather Humphreys spoke out on this tragedy yesterday. She extended obviously her sympathies to the family, but she mentioned a group of basically a working group that she set up about 3 months ago, which is being run by a former Garda superintendent to basically look at this issue as to banning breeds, restricting breeds. And just to note that the XL Bully breed is a restricted breed in this country, meaning that you have to have them muzzled and on a leash, for example. But there, I mean, you can own one. There's nothing stopping you from owning one. So that group is currently looking at whether or not an XL Bully breed should be completely barred in this country. So she's waiting for I suppose that group is looking at that. This incident is probably going to expedite that process, I would imagine, because now there's pressure, on government officials to do something about this. There's a lot of groups coming out yesterday. Even veterinarians have seen on RTE News talking about the dangers of an XL bully breed and how they should be barred.
And I think just watching the minister last night on RTE, she did say effectively, if this working group recommends a ban, she will do that.
Yeah, and she's effectively waiting for that recommendation. No, she's not going to make that decision on her own. But I think her hand might be swayed. Like, I mean, an incident like this, gets people angry. And I've seen a lot of not that you should ever just gauge social media, but there's huge anger on social media in relation to this, and a reaction like I've never seen. People come down on different sides of the debate. It's not the dog, it's the owner. I've seen that said. I look, I don't know. I'm not an expert on these types of things. I've never owned a breed like that. I'm not qualified to say. But certainly there are, as I said, veterinarians and people that are looking at this now saying that it's a particularly dangerous breed of dog, and perhaps people shouldn't be breeding them, shouldn't be owning them. I would say, just objectively speaking, they're and I've seen them. I mean, you've probably seen them, Mick. They're a very popular breed of dog. You probably see one in every housing estate in the country. I'm sure, in the right hands, well trained and are probably very friendly towards their owners, but it's just the sheer size and the strength of them. They're very muscular, powerful dogs, and if they even turn for a second, I mean, most people, I think, don't stand a chance. That's the difference between that and a terrier or a different type of breed. They're just a very, very powerful, strong dog.
And I think the indication of their strength was the Garda Armed Support Unit was called to this, and they had to shoot one of the dogs.
Yeah, so the local regional armed support unit there in Limerick had to be called to the scene, and yeah, as you mentioned, shot and killed one of the dogs involved. All four dogs have been seized. The other dogs had to be restricted at the scene, and I don't want to get into graphic details, but I was told that the members who arrived at that scene were particularly horrified by what they came upon. It was a very gruesome scene.
Do you ever notice, Paul, and please God, I hope I'm wrong, but things like this, one event seems to happen, and then pretty soon there's another event. It just, I don't know what it is. So I hope to God nothing else happens, but that might force the government's hand as well.
Well, it may. Well, I mean, this is the first fatal incident that I'm aware of, but there was an incident, I think, last year in County Wexford involving a young boy, Alejandro Maizan, and he was attacked also by an XL bully, very brutally attacked. Thankfully survived the incident, and the two owners of that dog actually went to court and were convicted in relation to it. But that was an incident that also sparked a national conversation. Thankfully, in that case, the child survived. But I remember seeing photographs of the injuries, and I mean, they were very bad. The child was lucky to escape with his life and is thankfully now doing very well.
And I think you're right. Very few people would stand a chance up against these dogs, especially four or
Mm.
even one. I mean, you'd be in real trouble, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and I mean that's what happened in this case. Nicole was at home on her own. There was
Well,
nobody
sorry,
there
was it
to.
her birthday? Sorry to interrupt you.
It was also, yeah, another, I suppose, tragic element to this. She had just come home from celebrating her 23rd birthday that day when the attack happened, and I've seen relatives, in posting tributes on social media. Her sister spoke about how she was only talking to her seconds before and said that she tried to help her. Um, we're not privy to exactly what that means in terms of what conversation they were having about the dogs, but it indicates that there were issues there. And also another tragic element of this, I mean, just in looking at the social media of Nicole, you can see that she had posted publicly on a Facebook group that she was having trouble with one of her XL bully dogs in terms of controlling it and getting a leash onto it to take it out for a walk. She was asking for advice on how to control the dog. So perhaps giving an indication of how difficult it is to own a breed of this type. And I know people are going to come at me and say I have an XL bully and they're they're lovely and they would never harm a fly. Um, each case is different. And any dog can turn, I'm sure. But I think just the point that's really being made is that these are very, very strong, powerful dogs, and I don't think anyone would stand a chance if they turned on them.
That's shocking. God love her. Terrible way to go, especially on the birthday. Poor woman.
It's a very tragic case, and there is a ongoing Garda investigation into it, should say. So, as to where it goes next, the exact facts around it haven't been established, but it's a very sad case.
Okay, shall we move on? You had a very interesting story about a an attack, I suppose, linked to the Kinahan-Hutch feud.
Yeah, well, it's funny, isn't it? Like how we were only literally just talking about how the feud had dissipated, and there didn't appear to be any active signs of tensions, anything going on, and then we hear word of this incident. Now, this doesn't mean the feud has reignited, but it's worth noting. So there was a horrendous attack that happened in Sheriff Street just last weekend on Saturday night in Noctur's pub. So people might know Noctur's is quite a well-known pub there on Sheriff Street. And Stephen Curtis, a Kinahan cartel associate, was drinking at the bar when I understand he was set upon and attacked and slashed in the face and in the body. So, it was a slash attack. It was somebody. I would say they didn't go in to kill him anyway, but they caused him serious, grievous bodily harm. And an ambulance had to be called for him, and there's a Garda investigation in relation to that. But Stephen Curtis was hired effectively by the Kinahan cartel to play a role in a very complex plot to murder a brother of Jerry the Monk Hutch, Patsy Hutch, back in 2018. So February and March 2018, you may recall, Mick, this was a crazy story at the time. This was probably one of the more convoluted assassination plots by the Kinahan cartel. There were up to 10 men involved in it. And the plot basically was to lure Patsy Hutch out of his home on Champions Avenue there in the inner city, because at the time it had a Garda protection post on it. But they knew that he had a motorbike, and basically they wanted to effectively set up a plot where he would be lured out on the motorbike, and then he would be intercepted on a more open space, shot and killed. And there were 10 men involved in the plot in total, including Mark Capper, and including the individual that we're talking about that was attacked on Saturday night, Mr. Curtis, and also his brother, Patrick Curtis. Now, Stephen Curtis got away to some degree. He had played a much more minor role involving just the securing of phones in this incident. So he wasn't, he didn't play as much of a hands-on role as some of the others. So he he only got 5 years in prison in 2020, and he has already, with remission, served that time. So we weren't even aware, actually, that Stephen Curtis had been released from prison in September of 2023 actually. So he's been out since then. But for whatever reason, he must have felt safe in Dublin's North Inner City on Saturday night and drank in Noctur's pub, which is, frequented by quite a number of characters, I would say. Um, but that drew the ire of particular criminals who we understand are connected to, I suppose, the Hutch crime organization. There are innocent Hutch family members before anyone gets on my back about that, but
It,
there
it's
is also
it is important to set. We always say there's the Hutch extended family, and then there's the Hutch organized crime gang, and there is a very big distinction. We do need to be fair about that. But I'm just going to make one point, Paul. We have spoken about the feud before, even last week. We were always talking about, it's not as if it's, say, the Kinahans or the Burn organized crime group from South Central Dublin heading over the river, getting into the North Inner City. This is up close and personal, and that's one thing that Gardaí have always advised me. And on this, I think this is an example of this, that it's events that can just explode like that because they are really in each other's faces. And I think this is an example of this. So this is why I suppose Gardaí would be telling me, and perhaps yourself, okay, the feud is quiet, but you can never say never because things can just erupt like this. Yeah. So who knows what's going to happen?
Well, light a match, yeah, and that ignites the whole thing. And I think what happened here is just the presence of Stephen Curtis in this bar drew the ire of a particular Hutch affiliated criminal, a very dangerous and violent criminal who I'm not going to name here because he is only a suspect in this, but he hasn't been charged with anything. But he has serious offences to his name, and he is associated with the Hutch crime organisation, and he is the chief suspect in this attack in Noctur's pub. So yeah, whether it spirals into other events remains to be seen, but it's the first, I suppose, Hutch Kinahan clash that we're aware of in a couple of years now.
Yeah, and I think that's the reason why, how can I put this? The guards are, cautiously optimistic, but they still have their guard up because anything could happen at any time. And this is one thing that has always been pointed out to me. I'm not going to say it's intrafamilial because it's not, but there are people who grew up cheek by jowl with members of the Hutch extended family who were targeted and the separate Hutch crime gang. And that does cause problems because there isn't that separation. They're on top of each other.
Yeah, and I mean, I suppose, now there are several members of the Kinahan cartel who were jailed, who have been released from prison. I mean, it's shocking to imagine that amount of time has passed already. But some of these people who played roles in conspiracies to murder, they only got a handful of years. Like Stephen Curtis got 5 years. Okay, his brother got 10 years. But a lot of them are back on the streets or about to be back on the streets, and that's going to create kind of new tensions and new dynamics that Gardaí are obviously preparing for. So it just remains to be seen, will there be further clashes?
Yes, well, we'll be keeping an eye out. I know the guards will. Can we talk about you stalking a stalker?
Oh yes, Mr. Raymond Dunn. Well, you originally followed this story, so you're quite familiar with Raymond Dunn. He was convicted of harassing a woman down in the County Carlow area. We're not going to name that lady because she has asked for anonymity, and we respect that. But she's a lovely lady. We both interviewed her now. I had the pleasure of meeting her. And it's a really horrific case where she was being harassed by this man that she was in a relationship. And Raymond Dunn placed a tracker on her car. So I think we discussed it on the pod when it happened. He was convicted in relation to it. And he received a suspended prison sentence. So he didn't go to prison. And he was ordered in particular to stay out of the Tullow area where the victim resides in this case. So Raymond Dunn appealed that. And so I attended the appeal there last week. All we knew at that point was he was appealing the sentence. But when we got into court actually realized that he was appealing the particulars of his sentence that were barring him from being in the Tullow area because he was living in his uncle's address in Tullow. But of course, the court heard, and this was the victim's main concern, that that address that Raymond Dunn is residing in is only 7 doors up from the victim's home. So she still sees him, nearly every day. And that was her concern, that like while he has been convicted, she still, he sees him. And that's a problem for her. But his problem is that's my place, that's my home. So what am I supposed to do? So the judge in this case effectively decided, so we had to hear the facts again, and the victim had to give her victim impact statement again, and the overall facts of the case had to be heard about Raymond Dunn placing the tracker on her car and following her for months, and lots of different disturbing incidents where he was harassing her and showing up at places where she was. And the judge sided with the victim, which is, of course, no surprise, and really felt for her in this case. Didn't have a lot of sympathy for Raymond Dunn or his ask, but she basically gave a new sentence, which is she gave the same suspended sentence, and then instead of barring Raymond Dunn from the Tullow area, I think this is much stricter, and the victim is also happier with this condition. He must now not not enter within 1 kilometer of the victim's home, and he's not allowed within 500 meters of her place of work. And that effectively means that Raymond Dunn has to move out of the home that he was living in, his uncle's home, because the court heard he also has another address that he lives at with his mother. So he's basically told, go live with your mother, get out of your uncle's address. And Raymond Dunn asked for time to move all of his belongings. He said he needed a week to do that. The judge said, no, the order is in place now. You got to get out today. And if you can't do it yourself, you've got to get help to get all your belongings out of there. And that order applies for the next 10 years. So he can't come within 1 kilometer of the victim for the next 10 years. And I spoke to her afterwards, did an interview with her, and she was actually delighted with that sentence. And she felt that it was, it gave her peace of mind that these conditions are now placed on Raymond Dunn.
And when I spoke to her when we did the story originally, the thing that stands out from my interview with her was that she felt listened to. She knew that Dunn wasn't going to get a jail sentence, and I think this is common to a lot of victims, the conviction in its own right and the consequences for him, she felt listened to and vindicated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I got that sense as well. She did consider waiving her anonymity and speaking out, but she felt, and I can empathize with this, the most important thing to her was that he was named and shamed and that she was believed. And so we did that and told her story. She now wants to just move on with her life. I mean, she's lived a life of hell. And in one sense, she wonders, had he not been caught in the way that he was when the tracker was found on the car went in for a service and the tracker was found, and she told me about seeing the blinking light and how it just gave her a shock. Had that not been discovered, how far would Raymond Dunn have taken it? Because he had what she called an obsession with her. And she was really terrified, and still is to a certain extent, looking over her shoulder, just wondering, how far would he have taken it?
Thank God it just appeared like that. But so you had an interaction with Mr. Dunn, and did he feel? A lot of criminals do feel sorry for themselves. Mm-hmm. Did you get that sense that he felt sorry for himself in this regard?
I get that sense that kind of entitlement and leave me alone. He was on the phone a lot, in and out of court, kind of eyeing up the photographer, who wasn't hiding. In fairness, the photographer was just standing at the end of the steps of the court, but kind of pacing around for a long period of time on the phone. Didn't hear him talk while he was on the phone, but just walking around, sort of maybe trying to figure out what he was going to do. And then I was getting fed up, to be honest, because I was going to doorstep. I was going to approach him basically when he walked down the steps, and he knew what I was at as well. So after a while, I just said, "Look, Mr. Dunn, look, obviously I want to speak to you. Do you have anything to say? Do you want to apologize to your victim? Are you ashamed of your actions?" And he was like, no, I'm not commenting. And I said, well, so you don't want to apologize to your victim? And he said, I already apologized. which, the victim says he's never apologized to her. In the original case, a solicitor for Mr. Dunn said that he wished to apologize, but she's basically saying she's never heard the words "I'm sorry" from his mouth. But he's saying he apologized. So then eventually he obviously made the decision to walk down the steps. And I said, Mr. Dunn, have you, anything to say? Are you ashamed of your actions? And he told me to stop pestering him at that point. And I said, well,
Stalkers have rights, Paul.
I said, well, I'm not pestering you. I'm just I'm giving you a right to reply here. I mean, I think people would like to hear, an apology from you, or some sort of, are you have any remorse for your actions? And he basically then said to me, if you don't stop following me, I'm going to go into the Garda station and report you. Now, we were only at the front gate of the courthouse, so I'm not going to follow you. Off you go, But the irony of that, yes, a stalker.
You are allowed in a public place to go up and ask a subject questions, and that's not harassment, and that's not stalking. Stalking is fitting a tracking device to a lady's car and following that person from months and appearing where she is. Going up and asking a convicted criminal questions is not stalking, or is not pestering, and is not harassment.
I think he should count himself lucky. I mean, he received a suspended sentence. What he was convicted of and what it is under the law, it's probably the max sentence that he could have got. He has no previous convictions. The judge even spoke of the restrictions of the law that she had to act within in order to sentence Raymond Dunn. I mean, he gets to move on with his life. The only condition is that he stays away from the victim. It's the least he can do now.
Just to go back to one thing, which I thought was interesting, and it struck a chord with me. You were saying he was there and you went, fuck it, I'll have to go up and talk to him now. Sometimes when you're on a stakeout or when you're doing something, you just go, I'm sick of this. It's happening now.
Yeah, because I think he was just playing games, and I think he thought if he just stood around long enough that we'd leave him alone. And I was like, well, let's just get this over with.
Well, we might talk about Daniel Belling now.
Yeah, but, I want to ask you about Belling,
Yeah, but I will say it's the other end of the stick there. I've often spoken about this. I was down on a stakeout in Bantry it was Monday, bank holiday Monday. It was a lovely day, but I was there for about 5 hours. And we've often spoken about this. You're on a stakeout and you have 5 hours or 10 hours of boredom and 30 seconds of panic. I was at one end. The photographer was at the other. And he obviously drove past the other way. So I get a call from the snapper going, he's here. So it was, of course, 10 seconds of panic and running and getting over to him. But we did get to speak to him. So he was very forthright. Let's talk about his background. You've spoken to him more than me, in fairness.
Well, yeah, just to, I suppose, remind people or tell people who aren't aware of the case, this is a really strange case. I mean, it's Ian Bailey level, kind of odd. Yeah, Daniel Belling, he is a German national, German born, but he was married to a lady by the name of Xing Li, and they did have a life here in Ireland, and they were on a trip in the Mediterranean on the MSC Magnifica. Magnifica, sorry.
Magnifica.
That's
GN in Italian is nya.
Yeah. Well, they were. Okay. Thank you for that. Man speaks fluent Italian. Yeah, they were on this cruise ship back in February 2017. But when Mr. Belling and his children got off the ship, Xing Li was nowhere to be seen, and she was reported missing. And effectively, he became a suspect pretty early on in his wife's murder. There's been a lengthy investigation in Italy in relation to that. And as you broke the story there just last week, that Mr. Belling has been convicted in a Roman court in his absence of his wife's murder and sentenced to 26 years in prison. He has long maintained his innocence. We have spoken to him over the years. I met Mr. Belling, I'm going to say 2 years ago, when he was living in Dublin. And speaking of doorstep experiences, it was an unusual one because I kind of half expected he wouldn't talk to me. In the end, it was me that had to say, "Okay, I'll leave you alone now. Goodbye." Because
enough already.
I actually couldn't shut him up. He was more than happy to talk to me and to have his photo taken. Um, I think it's fair to say he's an unusual man. You look, he's a German national. English is not his first language, so the conversation at times might be a bit amusing because you're trying to maybe just fully understand what's being said. But Mr. Belling is pretty open and clear that he did not murder his wife, and he's pretty black and white about it as well. I mean, he has openly spoken about trouble in his marriage and says that he wasn't happy in his relationship with Zingli, that there were language issues, and I subsequently did interviews with him over the phone where he told me that if his wife were to turn up now alive, that they would no longer live together, that they would live separate lives, that he felt that they weren't compatible. These are all things that he has said. Certainly added to the finger of suspicion, I would say, but he maintains that he didn't kill her, and has even gone so far as to say that if she was murdered, somebody else did it, that perhaps a gang did it. But the latest development and the reason why you went after him is because he has now been convicted in his absence of his wife's murder.
And just to give an indication to listeners how we get stories, it was the Thursday evening. I usually do the late shift on a Thursday evening, and you're bored bollock, and you're scrabbling around for stories essentially, right? Not too many because you try and take it easy on a late bit because something happens. But anyway, it's just sitting there, and like you search online, and obviously you mentioned I have Italian, so I would search for Italian or Spanish or French or whatever, just news alerts, you do your Irlandese, Polizia or whatever coming up, right? And this came up, and it was, oh, 20, he got 26 years. So I think I messaged you in capital letters, which is always a sign, oh shit. Are we aware Daniel Belling just got 26 years? Because it was your story, I thought it was new, it was old, and I hadn't seen it.
Well,
so it was
it sort of lost track of it because the case has gone on for years. Yeah.
So I will just explain it. So there are three courts in Italian. I was speaking to Luigi Conti, who is Mr. Belling's solicitor or lawyer over in Italy. So this court is the Court of Assizes. So I'm not going to say it's the district court, but he explained it's level one. There are two other, he called them gradi. There are two other courts that you go to. So he said it's not the end of the world. It's a bit of a surprise, but there are other courts that we're going to. He said, he expects the process to take years, and he fully believes that Mr. Belling will be exonerated. And he did say there's no evidence against him and that they're going to fight it. And Mr. Belling, when I spoke to him, also said, there's no evidence against me, really. So he's confident, and Luigi Conti is confident.
Interesting. Well, it's just when you broke that story that night, I remember you were saying try and get in contact with him. So I know you'd spoken to his solicitor, and I tried to get in contact with Daniel Belling. Like, he wouldn't answer the phone. He eventually sent me a text saying that he didn't want to talk about it, but he said that it would be challenged. So that was the first indication that we got from him, that he would challenge the conviction. But whenever someone tells us they don't want to talk about something, that kind of spurs us on to like, we really need to talk to him. So in fairness to you, you did a bit of digging and you actually established that he had moved.
Look, I mean, this is it. We rely on people. And I know a lot of people who listen to this pod are in contact with us, and people don't, it's one of the reasons why I like doing this pod. It encourages people to contact us. Is that a way of putting it?
Oh, yeah.
So we're very grateful, and thanks very much. So anyway, somebody contacted me to say, look, this fella's living in a caravan in Bantry, because that's a long drive. I mean, I did 900 kilometers on Monday. Jeez. And there's always that pressure of, fuck, I'm going down here. It's the whole day and I'll get nothing. But we got him. So I walked up to him, and I did the old Conor Feehan trick. Conor Feehan in the end, the best doorstepper in the country. I walked up and he stuck my hand out, and he couldn't say no. So I said, Mick O'Toole from the Star. Okay then. And he started talking. I said a couple of, because it's been your story, Paul, I haven't really been that in depth to it. So he started talking about, I think he does accept now that basically that his wife is dead. He told you that, didn't he?
Yeah, he believes that she was murdered. I think he said, similar to you, possibly that she had gotten involved with some sort of nefarious Chinese group.
he used the term, I think she got involved with shady businessmen, and she went to meet them voluntarily from the cruise ship, went to meet them voluntarily, tried to come home, and they killed her. But then I just thought it was a bit weird. I asked him, look, were there any problems in the relationship? And he goes, it wasn't good. And he said, there were language difficulties and cultural difficulties. And he said, I would not recommend marrying someone who does not speak the same language as you, which I thought was a bit, okay, a bit weird. You think that you'd know that before you get married, but it was just slightly surreal. So we were standing in the sunshine, and a couple of things I thought were very interesting. I asked him, Luigi Conti, the lawyer, said it will take a couple of years. I asked him, and he said, look, I could be fighting this for 10 or 20 years, but I'm going to win, and he will. And then he said, when he does win, he is going to go for compensation from the Italian courts. Now, I don't think that's a runner. Law enforcement or prosecutors in Italy have the right to charge anyone. You can't have people here going, I'm not happy with you charging me, so I'm going to sue. So I don't think that's a runner.
Well, it's a strange one. This is why I'm kind of comparing it to Ian Bailey, and it's funny now that you're kind of down in Cork as well, and I think he wants to go and live in West Cork. I think he told you. Like Ian Bailey, look, I think it's fair to say he is an unusual individual, and he doesn't say maybe what you would expect him to say. But to be fair, in terms of the facts, of untested facts, because there was no defense launched, actually said in the Italian case, there's no body in this case. Zingley's body is missing. There was a body, I think, recovered in a suitcase in the sea, and they thought it might be her, but it wasn't. So there's no body in this case. There's no indication as to exactly how she died, how she was murdered. So it's all quite circumstantial, to be fair. What evidence is there, apart from his unusual nature, let's say, what evidence is there against Daniel Belling?
Look, just from the outside, it does seem pretty weak. There is Italian media call it a trolley missing from the cruise ship. So the Italians are claiming that he killed Zingley, put her in the trolley, and used the trolley to dispose of the body. In other words, threw the trolley off the ship. It was off Civitavecchia, which is a port near Rome. So the allegation would be he threw her in the water in this trolley. But look, people can be charged if there's no body. I mean, there have been a couple of cases where Gardaí have asked for people to be charged, even though there's no body. Larry Murphy, for example, the guards wanted him charged over Deirdre Jacob. So that's not a biggie, but it's just, for me, on the outside, there's not that much real evidence. And Mr. Belling did make a point. I think it was the captain, he said, was going to give evidence to the effect that it is possible to get off the ship without being seen, which is what he says happened. But he said that the court didn't allow that. So look, I think it's not even half time. There's a long way to go on this. So it'll be interesting to follow it through the courts in Italy.
Well, it will, but also just, again, making an Ian Bailey comparison. I mean, like the French, can the Italians not now issue a European arrest warrant for Daniel Belling? And then does he then challenge that in the High Court and the Supreme Court in this country? Oh,
they 100% can. And I'm surprised that it hasn't happened yet, because he has been charged. And there was a Supreme Court ruling here that once, and now, you know that Italy and France and Spain have slightly different legal positions here than in Ireland. In Ireland, you're charged and then you go to court, whereas in those countries, you're like Arguido in Portugal, remember over Matty McCann. So you don't actually get formally charged until the trial starts, but that has happened here. So, but the Supreme Court ruled in Ireland, once the judicial process starts in whatever country it is, it's the same as a charge here. So you can be extradited. There can't be an EAW, and I'm really surprised that it hasn't happened in this case.
Yeah, but I think, the difference between Bailey in this case, I think with Bailey, the French prosecuted him for a murder that happened in this jurisdiction, and that was what the whole issue was about. But that just doesn't apply here. This is a murder that is in Italian territory. It's been prosecuted in an Italian court, and he's been convicted of it. So I would be quite surprised if he wasn't facing arrest relatively soon. Oh,
100%. And just while you've mentioned Bailey, the major problem I had with this whole thing about Bailey was, well, two things. Firstly, the murder happened in Ireland. So
Mm-hmm.
I know there
Yes.
is a French. I know there is
Yeah.
a French law. Okay, that's that. But what really troubled me was the DPP twice in Ireland. The Irish DPP twice said, "No, not having charges in this." And I look, we're not legal scholars, but I found that really, really troubling.
Mm-hmm.
Did you not?
Yeah, I did. I mean, you look, and we'll see what this cold case ultimately crops up, and whether
Mm,
the facts against Ian Bailey really were there or not. You know, but yeah, certainly it was prosecuted in this country, and it didn't. You know, that's where it really probably should be prosecuted. The difference with this Belling case, okay, like Ian Bailey, he didn't contest it. Um, you know, but I think he will face an arrest. He will have to go over there. Whether he gets another trial, an appeal. I don't know what the next process is, but yeah, the story isn't over yet.
I think we'll be doing more doorsteps with Mr. Belling in the coming years.
We shall. Shall we just? I want to briefly acknowledge the fact that today, as we're recording this, probably the biggest story of the day today will be the release of Molly and Thomas
Mm.
Martens from prison in North Carolina, where they have served a very short amount of time in prison for the manslaughter of Jason Corbett, Limerick Irishman and father of two. This is a case that's been going on for many years. You and I have covered it. Our colleague Nicola Donnelly has covered quite a bit of it as well, and is covering it today. It's a very sad case. Both Molly and Thomas Martens, as people know, were convicted of Jason's murder and were sentenced to, life sentences in prison. They appealed it. There was a very long process in which it was appealed, and ultimately their convictions were overturned. And then there was a settlement agreement, and they went back to prison very brief amount of time, and they're serving time for manslaughter, and today is the day of their release. Jason Corbett was from Limerick originally and was in a relationship with Molly Martens, and the allegation that the Martens have made, which the family of Jason Corbett have vehemently protested and over the years, their allegation was of self-defense, that Molly Martens was defending herself and that her father assisted in that self-defense, beating Jason Corbett several times with a baseball bat and a blunt object in the bedroom of their North Carolina home. A very gruesome and horrific end to his life, but nonetheless, this is pretty much the end of that now. And sadly for the Corbett family, I think they've ran out of legal road, but they'll have to live with this for the rest of their lives.
It was about 4 years, wasn't it? They served not long for a
Yeah,
life.
very long, a very short period of time. I'm not going to read out this whole statement, but the Corbett family released a statement today where they said that Molly and Thomas Martens are responsible for the senseless and brutal killing of Jason Corbett. They said that Jason was drugged. They beat him with a brick and a baseball bat while he was unable to defend himself. Molly and Tom Martens left the room without a mark on either of them. The heinous actions of Tom and Molly Martens not only took Jason's life in a malevolent, cruel, and vicious manner, but they also set about to tarnish his reputation and use his children in a self-serving attempt to evade accountability. And people might recall, that Molly Martens did have the children be interviewed, and they made allegations which they have subsequently retracted, that their father was in some way abusive towards her. The children are now adults and say that their father was not in any way abusive, and they have no time for Molly Martens or Thomas Martens, and in their view, they hold them responsible for their father's killing, which they believe to be a murder, and many people do. But look, the court system in the US has now decided what it's decided, and a lot of people feel for the Corbett family. But today is a sad day for them, and with the release of Molly and Tom.
Yes, very hard. A really short time for a killing. I just wonder, not that we can, I'm sure we would try ourselves, but I would probably anticipate that Molly Martens will do a sit down interview with some TV station over there.
In America, I would say, yeah, and they'll give their version of events. I mean, I have attempted to make contact, but they don't want to play ball with the Irish media because, in their view, they think that we have twisted the facts and called her evil and not given their side of the story. That's not for lack of trying, in terms of, not that we give anybody, just their side of the story. We have to balance it with the facts, but they don't want to talk. But I wouldn't be surprised if you see them, yeah, on a local American news station soon enough.
I think it's inevitable.
Yeah, even today, I mean, it's such as the media interest in this that the media have been in advance notified of the exact times of their release and where to stand and where to take photos. Can you imagine something like that in this country? Like if the Irish Prison Service were to advise you, in an official press release. Such and such a person is getting out of prison, and here's where they're going to be, and here's where you can take your photo. It's just another world over there.
Yeah, although, do you know there was a case of a convicted murderer releasing a press statement after he was convicted here? Your starter for 5, who was it?
Joe O'Reilly?
No, close. The one and only Graham Dwyer. Yeah. I was sitting there that day. By the way, it'll be 10 years next year, fewer than 10. It was April 2015. Anyway, a press release after his conviction. Bizarre. Only time I've ever seen anything like that in my more than 30 years as a simple hack. Weird.
Strange. I just wanted to mark the fact and say that, just in relation to the Martens, what I think of it, I remember covering the murder trial of Jason Corbett. And again, this is something about the American system that's very different to ours. When a case is over in certain US states, if you ask for information, they'll just give you everything. And so we got all the police files and we were sent everything in relation to the case, all of the facts, all of the exhibits. But in particular, we were sent the autopsy photographs and we were sent the crime scene photographs. Some of which have been published, but the more graphic ones, for obvious reasons, have never been published anywhere. And of course, we wouldn't publish them. But I would say the family of Jason Corbett, the people who were sitting in the courtroom, saw them. I have seen them. And just objectively speaking, with what I saw, that image is still burnt into my brain to this day, of the body of Mr. Corbett in that bedroom and just the scene that was left behind. It's very hard to come away from that and say
it was self-defense.
Yeah, it was just a horrendous, gruesome scene. So look, the facts are what the facts are. They are now walking free, but it was a gruesome, horrific scene, and it's just hard to imagine, what went on in that bedroom that night.
Right. Look, I know they were always going to get out, but 4 years does seem a very short time.
It's a sad end to a very long saga. I mean, this murder, this killing, I suppose, as it now has to be branded, happened in August of 2015. That's how long we're talking about it. So, but look, hopefully the family of Jason Corbett are able to, in some way, move on with their lives. It's very difficult for them. I know that Sarah Corbett, Jason's daughter, is doing her leaving cert and that she's in hospital at the moment, and our thoughts go out to her and her family, and hopefully she's doing okay. But I hear she's doing her leaving cert from her hospital bed on the same day that her father's killers walk out of prison. Very stark.
Very, very sad. All right.
We'll leave it there.
No, I'm pulling rank. No,
you're pulling rank.
Can we talk about one thing very, very quickly? And all the guards who listen, a lot of guards listen, as you know, will be interested in our views in this. The body cams have gone live. And I think,
yes, they have.
Yeah, I think that's a real game changer. I was at Store Street last Thursday, just before the Belling story, but anyway, for a technical briefing, and they showed us them. And there was a guard, Ray O'Brien, who spoke very well, actually, and he was obviously very knowledgeable about it. And he's involved in the program to do this. I was really amazed. The quality is 4K or whatever, HP, HD, or whatever you call it. But you know yourself, Paul, because we always have difficulties with audio. I was really, really gripped and fascinated by the quality of the audio. Like, there were people 10, 15 feet away and you could hear them so clearly. You know how difficult it is to get good audio. We always have problems out in the field and everything. That, I think, is really, really important. You can hear people so really, really clearly. And I understand, well, this has been said in evidence in court. It has already been used in one court case.
Already?
Wow.
Yeah,
an incident in the inner city. Somebody's charged, don't go into it, but it has been used then. But I think it is a game changer. Everybody films nowadays, and the only people who don't film are Gardaí. So now they can film.
No, they've been left at such a huge disadvantage for so long. How many GRA conferences have we gone to where they've been asking for body cams? I mean, it takes a long time for change to come about. This is something that's happened in the UK years ago, and we always seem to follow suit with the UK. The amount of cases that we've seen, and hopefully this will happen in this country, where when a person is convicted, we then get to see the footage. And hopefully the Gardaí do that. Maybe
no, it's not happening. I asked, at the press briefing or the technical briefing, I said, and it's great. Look, over in England, you always get the body cam stuff released, and they went, no, different regulations. This is my,
GDPR, are they?
Yeah, we have this hobby horse. England is a much more open society. The world will still turn if the guards, after a conviction, release body cam image of a killer being arrested. But Ireland is Ireland.
I think it'll happen. I think it'll happen eventually. It has to happen. Just in the interest of transparency, I think it makes sense for them to do it, unless it's a GDPR issue or something European law related.
I'm going to raise one issue. Do you remember that incident? Was it a month ago when Roderick O'Gorman's house was picketed or whatever in West Dublin, and the guards got there? Now, effectively, what happened? The guards got there, told them to leave, and they left. But the video that people put out showed it had been edited or whatever. So it appeared that the guards got there, were powerless, and the people stayed. But that's why the camera can lie if you edit it, but the Garda camera would be there to counter that. But we'll never see it. Anyway.
Yeah, well, we'll see if we see it. But yeah, no, it is a game changer. I mean, everyone has a mobile phone now, and there's so many incidences where people are filming, and then, as you say, they can edit it as they see fit. So look, it's just equaling the playing field, isn't it? A little bit.
Okay. So I think guards are very happy with it, in fairness. And also, I think their view is it'll probably reduce the number of complaints to GSOC about them, because they'll say, well, here you go. Here's what happened. So I think guards are very happy from that regard.
Well, it remains to be seen whether we get to see any of it, but yeah.
I have a level of confidence that we won't.
Okay, shall we leave it there?
Yes. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thanks to everybody. We'll hopefully talk to you next week.
Cheers.